Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Bright Line podcast, tales from recovering food addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about modifications and experiments in the BLE program. And what this means really is if you choose to not follow the plan exactly as outlined, what that may look like. And I think for a lot of people, it's necessary because of their lifestyle or maybe even like food allergies. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's a billion reasons, but I think the one thing that I want to say before we even get into like what that looks like for us is, you know, the thing I love about BLE really is that it can be modified and that there's no BLE police all the time. I mean, I hear that, like there's no BLE police. And so, you have to work the program in a way that makes sense to you and it makes sense to your lifestyle. And so I know that there are some things that we may do a little differently in our programs. And I don't think that there's any permission giving or anything like that because this is your own program. You have to work it the way that makes the most sense for you in your life. You can't work it the way anybody else does. And I think even if you follow, what someone else is doing to the letter, it may not work in the same way for you. So I know this is something that Bonny, because Bonny's been in the program longer than I have, that they have gone through some modifications and some quote unquote experiments. So do you want to talk about like the experiments and like what that looks like and why you might choose to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Susan Pierce Thompson, the creator of BLE, talks about you should do experiments if you want to do experiments, and that she's a 10 plus on the susceptibility scale, and when you do experiments, you risk a relapse basically. And she openly shares a lot of her experiments that she's taken that have not gone well. And I, being a 10 on the susceptibility scale, am also very aware and careful about experimentation because I think if I spent 2 days eating things off plan, including sugar and flour, I think it would just reset my dopamine receptors right back to ground zero, and it would take me weeks to get sober again, essentially. Like an alcoholic having a drink, it's not like just that drink. That one drink can trigger, all the cravings to come back. And I am so grateful to be free of the chemical, emotional, physical cravings that I don't want to risk sugar and flour. So I will say that I have not experimented with those two at all.
Right.
At
so those lines being, the hard and fast lines, the ones you will not cross experimentally or otherwise.
And
no sugar, no flour.
And I will say my husband has experimented with them like once a year, and he can just has it and goes, well, that was good, and that's that.
But he's lower on the susceptibility.
He is lower on the susceptibility scale. So a couple of the things that we did, and I'll just tell you, BLE is not a nutrition plan. It's a plan to help you deal with food addiction. Right. And they're very open about that. It's not like if you follow this plan, you're going to get all the nutrients you need all the time, right? There's a lot of latitude, including corn and squash or I'm thinking of like winter squash, right? Those are vegetables in this plan, right? But they're really starchy and sugary, they're natural sugars, right? But so when we first went on the plan and we're coming off of all the sugar and flour that we had been used to, we were having like winter squash every night and corn every night. Sometimes two of our vegetables were corn and winter squash. So I would call that a borderline experiment because that's not the leafy greens or the things, right, that the plan calls for. And what we found, of course, when we ran that experiment is that our weight loss slowed to nothing. Why? Because those are just higher calorie dense foods. So that's an experiment you can make. Like, how much corn could I get away with and still maintain the weight I want to maintain and still be healthier, feel good, or whatever. Some other things that we've done off plan. I initially went completely decaffeinated, and you guys know I'm a huge coffee addict.
You can't see me rolling my eyes. Like they're almost coming out of my head.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Big coffee addict. So the first thing I did was I completely decaffeinated and went to black decaf coffee. And so, and I still do that. I still do black coffee. And I got used to it because once, honestly, I got off the sugar, the milk, I do plant-based milk because I just have a milk allergy, not because of any particular like other reason. But, the ones I was choosing were the highest fat, highest sugar versions of those plant milks. And so, just coming off of that was a switch. And I completely decaffeinated. And then, to be honest, my digestive system did not work well, as many people have experienced on this plan.
She couldn't poop.
That's the thing. And so I tried all the things that people in BLE suggest, magnesium and all this stuff. It didn't work. And I realized, when I have caffeinated coffee, things work better. So I went back to one black caffeinated coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the day I was doing decaf.
Right.
And I then eventually experimented with letting myself have the plant-based milk again. That was an experiment, which is, again, not on plan because that's not, adding the milk. That either has to be a fat or a protein or whatever, right? And I was just giving it as an extra. And I did it when I got closer to maintenance.
Yeah.
And then I had to have the conversation with myself, is this triggering me to eat other things?
Right.
Yeah.
Is this causing a problem with my weight? Is this causing a problem with cravings? And the answer for me was no.
Yeah.
And so I was really strict with it. First, it was like once a day. I only get it once a day. And now it's like it's twice a day or whatever. And if I find that I feel like I'm being triggered to drink more and more, then I back off.
Right.
But it's not upsetting the rest of my program. And so, if I feel like I just want, something to sip, and I don't want to add the calories, or I don't want to go off plan, I'm just going to have a black decaf coffee. And I've grown to enjoy that pretty well. And it's just like people on the plan drink tea and drink sparkling water and all those other things. It does not derail me from my plan.
Right.
And then the final thing that we had talked about was bacon. Obviously bacon is a high calorie protein, right? It's got a lot of fat in it. And so if you weighed out 2 pieces of cooked bacon, it's going to come out to like half an ounce. And I'm on the woman's maintenance plan, which honestly for me is not much more than the meal plan, the weight loss plan, because I'm short. And so I get 4 ounces of protein for breakfast, which is 2 eggs, or I can have an egg and 2 ounces of something else. I'm not going to eat 2 ounces of cooked bacon, right? That is going to be a lot more.
It would be delicious.
It would be. But so we've just kind of made the experiment that 2 slices of bacon equals 2 ounces of protein. And so if I do bacon, I do 2 ounces. I do 2 slices of bacon and an egg. And then the other thing that we decided, because that can become...
Let's just also say you guys don't eat bacon all the time.
No, I was just going to say, the
Yeah.
other thing we decided is that can't be an everyday thing.
Right.
That's like a once a month thing.
Right.
And so we have really weird varying work schedules. So when we kind of have an alignment where we're both kind of off for a couple of days in a row, we decide that that's the week we're going to let ourselves have the bacon, and then that's it. And again, we have found that is not triggering to eat more or to do more. Where, to be honest, corn is a bigger, which is an on-plan food, but the experiment of having it every other day causes no weight loss or weight gain.
Right.
And it causes a craving for more.
Right.
Because it's a really sugary food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're verbalizing is really important, that it is exactly an experiment, and you conducted the experiment and you gathered the data and you were willing to have a very honest analysis of that data, instead of saying, well, but you didn't make excuses for why you could continue to do that thing.
Right. Or just move into it blindly and pretending it's not happening, right?
Right.
Where it really just becomes a line break.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the
Yeah.
thing, is if you're going to experiment, be really deliberate about it. Maybe even, obviously if you're writing down your food the night before,
Yeah.
write down, I'm going to have this thing, I'm going to try
Right.
bacon. And then ask yourself to write down each night after you have that food,
Right.
how did that make me feel? Is
Right.
it making me
Right.
have increased cravings?
And in BLE, there are some very specific questions, and I'm sorry guys, I don't have those like in my head right now, but you can, if you're in the program, you can go look at the modules or whatever, but there are very specific questions when you're going to, and I'm putting in air quotes, conduct the experiment,
Right.
that you ask yourself,
Right.
like, is this triggering? Is this,
Yeah,
how is
it's-
this making me feel?
Do I have peace with it?
Do I,
Yeah.
okay, oh, Bonnie's got
I
it.
know
Look
some of
at-
them. Do I have peace around it?
Right.
Is it escalating?
Oh,
Meaning,
yes,
am I
yes.
doing it more and more and
This is
more?
ringing
Yeah.
very
Is
familiar.
it triggering cravings?
Right.
And how is it affecting my weight?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, am I okay with that?
Right.
And so I think those are all things you have to consider anytime you make any adjustment. Even again, like corn, which is in the plan, but
Right.
you know what I mean? And as Meagan said, sometimes you might need to make adjustments to the plan because you have a nutritional health issue. Again, you know, if you're deficient in a certain food,
Yeah.
or a mineral or element, you know, you can eat steak every night on this plan.
Yeah.
That's a protein, right? But is that, I've recently read somebody concerned because their cholesterol went up on
Yeah.
this plan, and it's like probably, again, there's different kinds of fats you can eat. What, you know, are you doing bacon fat and beef fat, or are you doing
Right.
olive oil and, right? And I mean, so there could be things affecting that.
Well, and I will say the other thing too is that there are experiments that are very, what I think are like very healthy, you know, knowledge-based experiments that we can do in this too, above, like, so for instance, I do some regular hiking, and I was having some severe hunger on the days after I hiked. And I'm doing, like, you know, between 5 and 10 miles when I'm hiking. So they're not small hikes, and I was, you know, I'm burning quite a few calories. And so I actually went on a coaching call. You know, one of the coaches advised me to add some extra protein on the days that I'm hiking, and it has helped. And I was nervous about that, but I wanted to hear the official word from the coaches, like, which is the funny thing, is I knew that that's what they were going to say, but I didn't want to do it without the permission, which is a whole nother, you know, like a whole nother psychological thing. But I think for me, now knowing that it's like, okay, you know, days that I hike, I know I can have some extra protein because that will help me with the hunger. And it hasn't affected my weight loss. It doesn't trigger me, maybe other than I'm like, ooh, I should hike today so I can eat some extra protein. No, I don't do that. But, you know, it's really just it's a maintenance of my body of, like, I need extra protein because I'm going to be hiking today. So I think there's other things that you have to think about. And, you know, they've now renamed so there's the weight loss version, and then they used to call it men's and women's. They don't call it that anymore. They call it regular weight loss and enhanced weight loss. And the reason being is because there are people who are very athletic that are doing BLE and that cannot eat the amount of protein that's on just the regular weight loss and maintain just, like, daily function.
Right.
So I think you have to think about all these things as, like, you know, if you're someone who is sedentary all day long and you're not, you know, you're not doing any kind of physical activity, which is totally fine, and that's fine, then you probably don't need to do any kind of enhancement. But, you know, if you're someone who's already marathon training, like, going on 4 ounces of protein a meal for a woman is probably not going to be enough. And I think you have to be realistic about, like, what your life is and how that looks with what you add in the program. So I wanted to talk really quick about coffee. I have not given up coffee. I will never give up coffee. And I drink coffee with oat milk in it. So it doesn't, you know, it doesn't change anything for me. You know, I normally have a couple cups a day, and that's what I do. And the 2 ounces of oat milk is considered a condiment now. Like, that's what it's considered. And I know Susan says to only drink coffee with meals. I don't necessarily follow that. But again, it's not, you know, I have little kids. I need coffee. It's the one thing I'm not addressing it right now. Maybe in the future, that'll be something I'll think about to address, but it's not, if you're watching on YouTube, I have a big thing of cold brew.
tanker.
Yes, my tanker of cold brew with oat milk in it. So, So do you want to talk about, you don't have anything to talk about, Robin? None of the psychology of any of this, of the experiment?
Well, but I think, like we were talking about, the importance of truly being willing to assess what's working for you and what's not. That it's not, right, you can't make excuses about, well, yeah, I'm gaining weight because of X, Y, and Z, you know, not because of the bacon. Right, that you have to be willing to be really honest about what is the variable that's changing, right? And in a scientific experiment, we change one variable at a time, right? So that might mean, okay, I'm going to add bacon in, but nothing else in my diet is going to change, because you want to know, okay, if my weight's going up, or if I'm having, you know, more emotional eating, or I'm wanting to increase that behavior, it's linked back to the bacon.
Right. And what about accountability? I mean, I think that's another thing, you know, if you're going to conduct an experiment or do any kind of modification, I think it's probably good not to do that in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right.
If you find yourself wanting to add the bacon and not tell anyone. That's a sign.
I guess I was trying to get someone to say that. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Just like you mentioned that, you know, exercise more to lose weight. That's something that I used to do.
Yes.
And so I've found myself definitely being tempted to, like, well, I could add this and then I'll just go run today. And the reality is
Right.
sometimes I can't go run today because I hurt my
Yep.
knee or I got busy with
Yep.
work. And the beauty of this program is I've been able to maintain my weight whether or not I exercise.
Right.
So unless you're seriously doing these long hikes like Megan's doing, and then you're making the conscious thing like I'm adding in the protein to make sure just to offset this day of exercise
Right.
instead
Right.
of I'm just going to ramp up these foods
Right.
all the time because then I'll
Right.
just work it off. That's such an unhealthy
Yeah.
approach. And again, if you're trying to make a change, and you find yourself not wanting to share it with an accountability buddy
Yeah.
or write it down the night before, or if those things are happening, it's already escalating. I mean, in that
Right.
thing, do you have peace with it? Is it escalating?
Yes.
It's already escalating before you've even started, so that's your sign to be careful. And again, there's no BLE police. No one's going to tell you
No.
can't do that. But if you want to really succeed in this program and be healthy and have freedom from the food thoughts, be careful about your ads and be careful about your experiments.
Yeah.
Right, being willing to define what your actual goal is. And if your goal is to live a truly healthier lifestyle, free from that food chatter,
Right.
right, then you have to make a decision about what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
So, I think that to kind of end cap this discussion, we really just, we're telling you about our experience, like our experience on the program, Bonnie and I on the program, and Robin obviously is just, the psychological expert of the group.
BLE adjacent.
There you go, BLE adjacent. In that, the things that we have done to modify the program, but I think what I continue to think and love about BLE is that it's not a nutrition program, like Bonnie said.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, this isn't optimal nutrition. This is, here's a plan, here's an outline that will help you maybe get a hold of the food addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
like at the end of the day, like we do BLE because we're food addicts and that we need this structure around our food. Now, that being said, we have all different lifestyles, and the way that we live those lifestyles has to make sense. And I think if you're trying to fit into someone else's plan that maybe doesn't have the same lifestyle as you, I think that could be a recipe for some failure. And I just, I think that that's the thing, is that you have to really be, cognizant of these choices that you're making and why you're making them. And like Bonnie said, just really do, really have the discussion internally about why you're making the choices that
Yeah.
you're making. So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.